Very happy to be introducing Jose Ocasio-Christian today, CEO of Sales Partners, as well as Community in Space Incorporated. We'll be leading this great discussion this afternoon. Go right ahead.
Hi. How's everybody doing? I hope you're having a great day at the AmeriVet conference. And thank you, Nicholas and George, for having us helping me lead this topic and moderate this. And everyone, welcome to Preventing and Addressing Veteran Unemployment. To put a scope to this, think of this as the challenges associated with veterans being employed and compensated appropriately to the choices by the employers and service members that they transition. So it's more than simply the vet is underemployed. There are two sides to this, and I'm really excited to look forward to this. I am going to do 1 minute off script and to share with you a little bit about our panelists today. If you forget anything else, for all of you that are watching, I need you to take a screenshot of these individuals that are attending here. You get their names, you get on LinkedIn, and you connect with them. I had the opportunity over the last week to work with these individuals and learn from them, doing a lot of listening about how they saw underemployment. And they do way more than that. So I'm really excited for them to be here today. But again, if you forget anything else, connect with them on LinkedIn, pick their brains on anything and everything that they do with vets. To move forward on this what I'm going to do today is I'm going to structure a little bit as to how to look at underemployment as we go asking questions. Our panelists will introduce themselves, give a 1 minute about what they do. They'll start the dialogue and answer questions. And there are a couple of questions I'll insert in between as we do this. So let's get started. Okay. When I looked at my experience from transitioning after 20 years in service as an infantryman and a strategist, trying to figure out what I was going to do next, when it comes to the underemployment discussion, meaning will I be valued? Will my employer connect with me in the way that I want to be connected? There were 3 areas that I focused on. The first one was quality of life. How did I want my quality of life be post-transitioning? The second is the social factors. With who did I want to socialize with in the community or in my job post-transition so that my family, my group, whatever the values I had could connect. And then the last one, of course, was salary. And in part was because I'd spent 20 years knowing what my salary was going to be, and I did not know it. So how do you compare salary to value? So we start with that trifecta there of these 3 areas. And what I'm going to start the questioning now is with Chuck. Chuck, please introduce yourself. And then let's talk a little bit about the skills, expertise, values, the things that you work on at Home Depot and how you see this kind of framework I gave you playing out.
Thanks, Jose. So it's like we talked about the other day, it's very interesting when we coach and we talk to people about, hey, typically this conversation comes up with salary negotiation. And we ask kind of the same thing, identify what you were making in the military. Are you happy with that standard of living? What you need, and also take into account that you're going through a life change. You might be buying a new car, buying a new house, going back to school, supporting a kid. All these things you need to take into account. And then also the question of what does the sector you're going into pay, and then also take into account, like you said, the social factors and also the geographic factors. San Francisco is very different than Atlanta, Georgia. And so those are some of the things we look at. And we're seeing a couple of things that are very interesting in the veteran space. The first one is for some people, you can be very lucky and you can have a technical skilled role that does a very good translation, like an engine mechanic, or if you're in finance, or if you're in, something that has a equivalent civilian career. But as you joked around, as an infantryman, I was an infantryman as well, or as I like to make fun of my 19 kilos out there, our tankers, I don't see very many Abrams rolling around I-75 in Atlanta. So they really don't have an apples to apples skills translation. The things that we see a lot of times that really helps with the unemployment and then underemployment is a term that we call upskilling. And this could be anything from going to a boot camp. There's a lot of really good 10 to 15 week boot camps out there that the GI Bill can help cover. They can take you in some very fascinating job areas like UX and software development and data analytics. There's also just a complete career pivot where you go back to school. And then one that we're really excited about is the trades. I remember when I was getting out, everybody says, you have to go back to college, you have to go get a degree. There's a lot of trades boot camps happening out there now, and there's a shortage in plumbers, there's a shortage in carpenters, a shortage in electricians, and these roles actually have a higher income ramp up speed than a traditional college graduate now because there is such a shortage. Plumbers, electricians, and carpenters are now making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 as soon as they're certified, and starting off high quality, great careers that a lot of the military skill sets of just figuring out how to fix something, how to solve a problem directly translates over to.
Thank you, Chuck. Sidney, it's obvious that Chuck brings in a set of skills, a set of experiences, and a set of values. And when we talked about this before this event, you brought up a lot of different aspects of experience. So please elaborate on that because and continue the exchange if you want with Chuck as we.
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Sidney Covington. I'm a Veterans Engagement Associate at AmeriVet Securities. And one of the things I kind of talked about in terms of experience is that I was a medic in the military. And so my current job does not have, there's like no correlation there. Like it doesn't make sense. Besides that, I help people. Outside of that, they don't like actually, they're not, you can't put them next to each other and the skills are the same. And so transitioning out of the military and wanting to get into a new career field makes it a bit difficult when you're doing something that is not the same thing as what you did in the military. And I feel like for enlisted personnel, we struggle with that the most because a lot of companies are like, we want to hire you, but it's like, we want to hire you for what you did in the military. Most people don't want to do that anymore. It's kind of like, I did this for however many years I was in the military. I know I want to do that anymore. I really want to have a career change. And then that experience piece gets complicated because I think as most people know, when you apply for a job, they're like 3-4 years of experience. It's like, well, I can't get the experience if everyone wants 3 to 4 years of it. So it's like, where am I getting this experience? And so one of the things that needs to really happen on the employer side is learning how to be more open to hiring people who may not have 3 to 5 years of experience in your particular field, but does have real life experience in other things and seeing how they can correlate in some kind of way. Like me being able to have to do something in emergency kind of correlates in like, if we're having something going on at work, well, how can we respond to this in the best way possible? And so like, there's some things that do correlate in some kind of a sense. And so I feel like employers need to do a better job at being willing to hire people who may not have direct experience like that particular job field. Another thing is that I feel service members and veterans, we have to do a better job at being more active and knowing like, if I'm getting out of the military, what is it that I want to do? Because I know like when I was in the military, I spent most of my time preparing for when I would get out. So like I was staying in school, I was doing internships. And I know for some people, it's like, well, I can't do that if I'm in the field every other month. But like try to find ways to make it happen because you have to, because the military doesn't care about your transition as much as you're going to. And so you have to really put in the effort to say like, I'm going to do this to prepare myself for when I get out because I know I don't want to stay in. And I know if you know you're not going to do the job you're doing at this time, you have to say, what is it that I need to do to prepare myself for when I do leave the military? Something that I think is very beneficial. Like I work in a finance firm and we do hire veterans who don't have any experience. Like we have an intern who is a surgical tech. Like it makes me like it's very odd that he wants to be in finance, but like we're giving him the experience he needs so that he can get his foot in the door because we know most companies are not going to hire him. They're going to see surgical tech and kind of throw his resume away. Whereas like, we're like, no, we know you want to get into finance. We're going to help you get there. And so I feel like a lot of companies have to be willing to take that risk and some companies just don't, and they need to be more open to it.
Sidney, this is great. Thank you. And I'm seeing all the comments and people relating to everything you said. So, Ross, I'm going to turn to you because one of the discussion points that we've had is we subjectively understand this transaction between the service member, as Sidney explained, and Chuck, and that connection to see that fit. To measure that, to explain to our employers that what is actually happening is a completely different story. So please introduce yourself and please let us know a little bit about the measuring as you're engaging employers on this topic.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jose. My name is Ross Dickman. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Hire Heroes USA. We're an employment services nonprofit that serves veterans and military spouses to help them find fulfilling careers after their time in service. And we serve all veterans, all military spouses, regardless of era, length of service, rank. We really want to make sure that we're helping them understand that transition, but the military lifestyle affects you at any point. So if you got out of service 10 years ago, you still might need help in translating that's the skills or the experiences that you had from that time as you look for future career growth. And Jose, you're right on the measurement part of it. When we try to look at what is underemployment, there are some tangible factors that are a little bit easier to do an overlay of, and I think Chuck hinted at that really strongly. What did you earn in the military? What was your pay scale there? And then trying to translate that to what is the pay scale at the role that you're going for. It's a sloppy metric a little bit, but it does provide some tangible aspects. At Hire Heroes, we focus on perceived underemployment. That could be from a salary perspective. That could be from a skills utilization perspective. It could be from, the individual doesn't feel fulfilled in the work. And there's some really interesting research being done out there in terms of how leadership activation feeds into a perception of underemployment. That's a little bit more robust than our system can capture, but there's some amazing research on it. What we find from this is, someone may be willing to Sidney's point, as they've navigated what their next career option is, they may be willing to take a lower salary because there are other aspects of that new career. Let's say that surgical technician moving into finance. They're probably not going to make what they did if they continued a surgical career pathway, but they're willing to accept that less salary because of the skills growth, the activation, the potential for onward mobility. But not everyone has that opportunity. So we tried to really dig into this, and we did a survey of about 10,000 of our job seekers, asking them about their perceptions of retention and underemployment. And we've got a rate of about 32% underemployment. And that matches pretty closely to what LinkedIn measures as well, and also perceived underemployment, which is about 37%. It tells you it's a big problem. That's mostly rooted in skills utilization and salary representation. And that's really why I think that knowledge gap that both Chuck and Sidney mentioned, understanding your transition, really getting help from Hire Heroes USA or other amazing charities and organizations that help you unpack your skills and talk about them and network appropriately to really overcome those knowledge gaps. But on the employer side, it's really finding those good inclusion points and the right pathways. So even if the salary or skills utilization isn't a match on day one, that the veteran who's coming in can see that career growth potential so that they know they have that opportunity to utilize those skills down the road.
Go ahead, Chuck. Come on in. That's the question. I know you want to tackle it.
Yeah, I wanted to caveat on that because I think Ross brought up some solid points there, and a lot of it is perception. So when I left the military, I took a fairly significant pay cut. That was between 15 to 20% pay cut to go into a new career. And so if you looked at all the numbers, I went from leading dozens of people to leading nobody. Went from making a certain amount to taking that pay reduction. And by the numbers, yes, underemployed, but I got into a company that I wanted to be into. I got into a field that I wanted to go into. I got a chance to learn. I had to learn a whole new set of languages, a whole new set of acronyms, a whole new set of business. Like I had no idea what a P&L, shrink, all these other acronyms, logistics terms coming. I had no idea. If I had tried to do a pure lateral, I would have failed. I would have sat in my first meeting and probably been completely clueless and made wrong decisions. But by taking the step back, filled the skill gaps, that enables you to take a longer runway moving forward. And so like the underemployment thing is very important to keep a lot of perspective on it. If you're going into an area that you want to go into that opens up doors that gives you that long-term career, it might be a good thing. Now, if you're going into underemployment because you're having trouble matching those skills and you're going into an area that you don't want to be at, a dead-end job, an area that just has no long-term potential, that is a serious problem. And that's where groups like Hire Heroes USA, a lot of these other groups are great resource to reach out to. I mean, we're a partner with Hire Heroes USA for just that reason. We actually take a lot of people who might not have a background in logistics, but we all know that every single person in the military has some aspect of logistics, right? And we can match them with great jobs inside of warehouses or corporate locations that are a good fulfilling and then also provide a long-term ramp.
Chuck, thanks. And by the way, thank you for the panelists answering questions. You can chew gum and walk. This is awesome. You guys are answering questions. I don't have to manage that. Thank you so much for doing that. What I want to do is now transition, bringing Patrick in on this. He had a couple of technical challenges to get in, but he's here. And he's actually, yeah, you made it, brother. Welcome. So far we have talked about the understanding the dynamic between the employee, this veteran seeking to come in, and some of the challenges of self-identification. And then on the right-hand side, we have the employer trying to measure the value proposition on getting this right. I want to ask you ahead of time, obviously, most employers cannot measure this accurately, but in some cases, if you're assessing your entire workforce, you're gonna get a feel for who's underemployed. Usually, unfortunately, it may be the veteran just because their perception and the reality of the job they're doing. So, Patrick, could you highlight a little bit of what employers, besides constantly assessing their workforce, what they can physically do about that if they have it inside their companies today?
Sure, I'm happy to do that, and it's a pleasure for me to join. Yeah. My name is Pat Hanley. I'm a manager for Con Edison in New York, utility. I work on the electric side of the utility. I'm also currently serving reservists, so I still live in both worlds. And I'm one of the leads of our Veterans Employee Resource Group. And I appreciate you asking that. And on the note of perception and how do we help manage perceptions for the companies we work for? And I think Suzanne in the chat that I'm looking at asked a similar question. How do we speak to our companies, our hiring managers? What's the burden, I guess if you want to call it that, on the company to help improve underemployment of veterans? And I think that's a big key to this puzzle. Certainly as veterans, we need to be introspective on ourselves. What do we bring? What value do we place on ourselves? What do we want for our lives and our work-life balance? And those are important questions we need to ask walking out of the military service and into a company, private world that may place different values on some of those things. So we need to measure those. But from a corporate or a company perspective, I want to, it's also on them to do a great job at understanding what values, what skill sets, what knowledge base a veteran brings to their organization. And that translation is not always obvious. For certain sectors of the private sector, some are very used to working with veterans. Government contractors, they get it. They can clearly draw the one-to-one relationship. They know exactly what you bring. They know exactly what your clearance means, exactly what this MOS means, because they've been brought up around that world. But you move to a world like mine, the utility world, we certainly have we have over 700 veterans at Con Ed, but to the point made in the chat, not every hiring manager and most hiring managers and executives are not veterans. And that's no fault of their own. They've done some tremendous things, but helping them understand what a veteran brings to the table and improving that for the company not only helps veterans, but it helps the company. Let's be realistic about what veterans do bring to the table. And as a lead for an employee resource group, I think one of the challenges I put out there to veterans that are working in the private sector is find a way to not only reach up to your hiring managers and your executives and help them translate and understand what a veteran is, what those skill sets mean, but also reach out to the veterans in your organization. Find a way to reach out to them, understand their backgrounds, where they come from, help the company help the veteran. Speak to the recruiting person in HR, speak to the HR person. You need to be a bit of a resource for them, help them get over that. And that's how I think we can be in a position as veterans in the private sector, we can be a part of the solution to this problem. So we need to understand the statistics, certainly, and we recognize those challenges, but we can take a proactive role here. And it is a partnership. If the veteran can join with that company, I think you can see a lot of dividends get paid. It may take some time. You may need to get creative. You may need to really get out there and pound the pavement and help folks understand. But we're in a position, if we're on this side of the table, to help make a difference for future veterans joining the workforce and help companies help themselves and see the true value of a veteran and what they bring to the table. And it's not just rank and where to leave pay-wise and those things. You can get past all those things and understand. Look at the leadership. Look at the training. Look at the willingness to work through adversity and be flexible. those are things that you don't teach in training and very hard to learn. But typically in our military cultures, we've been through those things. We learn that through trial and error, through our own experiences. Those are really critical things that today's companies are looking for. I don't know any company that's not. Let's help them realize the value that veterans bring and help push up and pull up this underemployment.
I love that Pat mentioned the role of ERGs in supporting that. You know, you wouldn't expect, and Chuck has spoke to this before as well, you wouldn't expect someone coming out of private equity to be able to move right into being a general. It's like a quote he used the other day, because that translation would be too hard. In the same way, you can't expect a hiring manager or someone in HR to learn every role and rank and position aspect of all of the branches of service. I like to say I came out of the Army, so the Navy is still a mystery to me. I can't understand the ranks at all. I need to access Navy people to help me in that. If I can't understand them after 12 years in the Army, how can we expect someone who never served, who didn't grow up in a family with that, in an area with a high concentration of military service, to really learn that? And Pat, thanks for the leadership you are doing as an ERG leader to help remove those barriers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, go ahead, Sidney, come on.
I wanted to bring something in that I feel also impacts veteran underemployment. I know when I first got out of the military, I was very prideful, and I was like, no, I'm gonna get the job by my own merit. I don't need help. I'm gonna do it myself. And I know this to be true for a lot of other veterans. Drop your pride and just accept that 80% of people who get jobs get them because they knew someone who worked there or someone who had worked at that company. More times than not, there's ATS systems, being someone who now receives applications. There's no way I'm reviewing 100 applications. I'm just not doing it. So if someone comes up to me and they're like, hey, I know this person, they do amazing work. I completely can't, I know that this person is going to show up and do a great job. I'm more than likely going to at least look at their resume and then extend an interview, especially if I'm like, well, they already have someone vouching for them. And then also if their resume is matching what this person is vouching, I'm more likely to hire them or interview them at least and potentially hire them. So you need to make sure you're networking. That is one of the things I regret now, because I could have had a job with Apple, because this one guy was like, oh, I want to hire you. And I was like, no, I want to do this other thing. And had I just kept his business card and stayed in contact with him, I might have been in Apple 5 years ago, but here I am and it's okay. So just drop your pride when it comes to applying for employment, because I'm telling you, you need to network. That's the only way to kind of get jobs in this market, is knowing someone who's already working there or who had worked there. So you need to, veteran unemployment, one thing, networking is a key to make it where you can get the job you're looking for.
And Sidney,
sorry. I'll just say I'm in the job I'm in today because a fellow veteran who I served with said, I think you'd be a good fit for this job. Yeah. So if not for that connection, I'd probably never be where I am, at the level I'm at, for sure.
And to give you the 2-minute version of Chuck's transition, I spent 5 months looking for jobs, 1 month completely unemployed, applied over 400 jobs, 20 of them at Home Depot, where I ended up landing. Never heard a peep from anybody except for headhunters who were trying to bring me into entry level, way below what my experience matched. I was sitting at a Taco Mac in Midtown Atlanta, eating wings. I like wings. My best friend's wife was sitting there with us talking, and she goes, my sorority sister works at Home Depot. Do you want me to give her your resume? Right there at the table, sent her my resume through Google Drive on my phone. 2 days later, had a job interview, because she wasn't even it wasn't like I was talking to a VP. I wasn't talking. She was an entry-level analyst, fresh out of college. She gave it to a hiring manager who was currently looking for a project manager spot for supply chain. Looked at my resume, had no military experience, but she saw 3 bullets on there that she said, oh, this matches what I'm looking for. Gave me a call. 7 days later, had a job. It was mind-blowing. 5 months of failing, and then literally eating in a booth in a Taco Mac, an email job into one of my dream companies. They were my top 2 companies I was trying to go to. And with joining a team that had no other veterans on it, none of them even knew anything about our backgrounds. But that networking is key. And even though today is a job seeker's market, what a job seeker market just means is there's just a lot more noise, a lot more applications going through, hiring managers feeling a lot more pressure. And exactly what Sidney said, unfortunately, I'm not looking through 100, 200, 300 resumes. I just can't. I'm going to look through the first 20, maybe. If I find 5 good people, I'm talking to them. And that's kind of, you're not going to change that as a job seeker. Unfortunately, that's the situation you're in. So you have to adapt your tactics. You have to be able to explain your background. You have to be able to network to overcome that, because like we talked about, you have to do your mission. You can't change the entire environment you're in.
Let me jump in and let me recap this, because I want everybody to make sure all our audience are understanding. There are two sides as we started. On the veteran side, or being the employee, network. And two, once you're in and you know there's a likelihood you will be underemployed, then you're going to have to work with your employer, either factual or perception, to set up the workforce review to acknowledge veterans within your organization. So it's going to take time, like Patrick said. And by the way, workforce development reviews are done by every company, and they have different segments, whether it's through gender, race, etc. Veterans is another big factor, especially on values. We'll talk about that next. On the employer side, and on the employer side, can't stress enough the understanding of this dynamic and culture. So in other words, again, goes back to my original point. Click on one of these names, connect with these individuals and these panelists, because they can explain to you that journey. So, because in some businesses, you may not have a veterans bucket in your team, but if you want to pursue it, I strongly suggest that you reach out to them. So far, we have a few minutes left, but so far we've been talking about the impact to the individual on the business. And it wasn't until I ran into these panelists that we had the discussion is the larger consequences of what happens when we don't address this, meaning, well, just a couple of veterans, they'll figure it out. And as a matter of fact, after the end of the conversation, I started realizing, oh my God, this is way bigger than just an individual and an employee trying to make a match to do it. So Chuck, I'll come back to you in terms of consequences for Home Depot, at least from an employee perspective, from your perspective, some of the consequences of this if we don't address this dynamic.
I'm proud to say that I feel that we do it fairly well. So there's a little bit of positive learning that came from this. But the big one is just turnover. And for a long time there was a long set of data that said veterans were leaving their first job within a year or 2 years at a very high rate. But turnover isn't just something that impacts the veteran. It impacts the company as well. The loss of experience and then having to spend the time to go through and source a new candidate takes time off of what we would consider somebody's regular job. And that negatively impacts the team, especially if you're in a situation where you have very high turnover and you're constantly having to go through and hire, retrain, lose, hire, retrain. God forbid that hiring manager or another partner takes another role in the middle of all this. So you get like the double pain of it happening, and actually grinds your company's ability to get things done to a halt. So by going through and creating a good hiring experience, a strong onboarding experience, and then a strong community. Everybody here was talking about the ERGs. We call them ARGs. No matter what you call it, BRGs in some groups, that strong community is also critical, because you go from a veteran, the veterans come from the military environment where it's highly immersive. We are a team. We all wear the same uniform. We have the same mission. We use the same language. That community also is very important. That's what makes people stick around. That's what makes people want to go to work, makes them want to put out their best, and then makes them stay. And if they stay and then they can grow that career, they can advance that career, it just solves so many problems. You can retain knowledge. You can continue to meet your mission. You don't have to spend every couple months restarting from scratch once again. So there's a major incentive for the company to do it right.
So Chuck, I wasn't trying to cut you off. I thought you were done. But I want to turn to Sidney, because I think you can answer the stigma associated with this in the larger picture, as well as the question that was brought in here by Joe Beasley. So on the corporate lifeism for me and the stigma associated between veterans and the consequences of not getting this underemployment figured out.
So I think one of the things, like in terms of stigma, is understanding that I think most people think all veterans deploy, which is not true. That's one thing that needs to be tackled. Another thing is like a lot of people think veterans get more compensation because they think they get disability, which is not also accurate. Because I know I was talking to some hiring managers and they're like, well, couldn't their disability kind of supplement what they're not making? And it's like, no, actually not everyone gets disability. And then also there's a rating. Someone on 10% gets only $100 a month. So it's kind of like, that's not enough that's not going to make a difference in the thousands of dollars every month for someone. Like $100 pays a phone bill, if that. So it's kind of, you have to think about that as well. And another thing is that people feel like they're not a cultural fit. And that saying has to go away, because what it's saying is people who have never worked here before cannot work here because they don't understand the culture here. And it's like, no, your company actually needs to change its culture to be more inclusive. And that's where I think that's one of the biggest issues. It's like, oh, we're trying to find a cultural fit. And it's like, no one's going to be a cultural fit because not everyone has the exact same culture. We live in a very diverse world. And so in order to be able to open your environment, you need to understand, what am I doing that's making it where if I'm hiring a veteran, and more times than not, more than half of them leave in the first 6 months, what is wrong with our current culture that's making it where they don't feel welcomed here? And what is it that we need to do to kind of address that so that we can actually retain our employees and our veterans in general? Because if you feel like you don't work in the corporate environment, it's more so than not that you don't feel welcomed. Like, I never thought I'd work in corporate America, and I love it. Never thought I would say this, but I do. And so you have to, your employer needs to make sure that they're making your environment feel more inclusive and more welcoming. And that's one of the biggest issues when it comes to retaining employees. If you don't make them feel included, you're not going to retain them. So that's something to always think about when you're looking at retention.
Thank you so much. Ross, I know you and I talked about this on a bigger strategic level. Please share some of your thoughts from a hiring heroes and how it impacts on a bigger scale, please, on this.
Yeah, absolutely. The underemployment aspect of it really does land on every age category, every rank category. We see it in our senior officers, we see it in our junior enlisted. And kind of part one of my concern would be continued underemployment is going to discourage these amazing, talented, capable workers from staying engaged in the workforce. And as more and more young veterans depart the labor force, I think it's a double hit to us. As employers, we're losing amazingly talented people. As individuals, they're losing a sense of purpose, a sense of identity, a sense of community engagement, a chance to be a provider, all of the things that having that job can provide for them. And then when you take it a step further, what are we losing as a nation from that? There's an economic aspect to that, but really we're losing aspects of our national security, because more and more the veteran experience is centralized into a tighter and tighter community with the all-volunteer force that depends on not just successful career and pride in service, but also successful opportunities afterwards. And you look to your neighbors and how do the veterans that in your neighborhood do? What are they doing? What kind of work? How are they performing? How do you perceive them? That's stuff that I think if we tackle underemployment and how that feeds into long-term, wealth building potential, community engagement potential, it helps us with national security too. I want to let Pat get in his as well.
Yeah. No, please, Pat, go right ahead, brother. We got a few minutes.
Yeah. So just, I guess to take off from what Ross was saying, couldn't agree more. I think as corporations, right? Most corporations will say we want to be good corporate citizens. We want to place ourselves in a position where we're not just looking out for our bottom line. We're looking out for our communities, those around us. We want to be servants of the greater good, and that beyond how we're doing as a company. I mean, corporate health is certainly a part of that. And particularly in the most recent couple of years, we've seen a high need for companies and individuals and teams to be more resilient, more flexible, more able to bend to the environment around them. COVID has certainly taught all of us how we need to be willing to work differently, change our routines. And as a veteran and someone who's friends with many veterans and appreciates the many things veterans have done, I can't think of many other groups who bring those types of things to a table. The resiliency, the willingness to work outside of our comfort zones, to take on new missions, new challenges. It's just ingrained in typically what the typical veteran is and has been brought up to do. And I would also offer that corporations, companies, we've seen a trend, and this isn't a recent trend, probably over the last couple of decades, where we're looking at a more values-based approach to how we want to get work done. We don't want to just say, make 20 widgets today, and I don't care how you do it and who you are and how you get treated. We're getting past that, and we're looking at, do you align with our corporate value? Do you believe in what we believe in? Will you stand behind our image, our emblem, our logo, and be a partner in us in the journey of making this company a success? And I would offer, and I think all the veterans on the line would likely agree, that when we raised our hand and took an oath, we took an oath typically because we believed in the values of the things we were promising to do. It was more than just what I was going to produce. We were producing safety, freedom, and certainly along with those things, we got professional and personal growth. But we, as a whole, are generally values-based, and I can't think of a better, pool of talent to go to as a company if you're looking to bring someone on that's going to get behind what you stand for and support your vision and your value set. So again, as someone who's in a company trying to push, I think those are messages that we need to get out there, and that national security piece is a part of it. Are we doing our part? That's doing your part as a corporate citizen. Are we supporting those who have served this country? Are we making serving this country a choice that's still a valid and valuable choice for a young man or woman to make, knowing they'll have a future beyond that? And if we're cutting people short on the back end, the repercussions, we'll start to see those things. So we need to continue to talk about what veterans bring to the table, and as veterans in organizations, be partners to those veterans, highlight those things, sell them across the hiring manager and across the organizations we work with. So it is a way bigger circle and cycle. And addressing these issues, hopefully we get ahead of those things and we continue to make serving a choice, a really viable choice for people with clear payoffs, whether or not they stay in the service.
Thank you, Patrick. I'll for everybody participating and listening to this, if you have not noticed the environment we're in terms of inflation, the local economic, the community aspect of this, as Patrick and everybody's bringing out, is very important. Community starts working, like Sidney said, with networking, whether it's joining your job, finding the right quality of life, or as Chuck was telling you, you're going to be joining a team and we may not be a fit, but we're going to work towards that. You have a responsibility in it. And so while this is truly about underemployment of vets, I walked out of this, and I hope everyone else did, of the strategic value of this. Because if we don't get it right with the veterans, I can assure you, there are other groups within every enterprise and every company, even Booz Allen. But if we don't get that right, we're going to have bigger issues, because that is the source of our national security, our pride, our representation. It comes with a lot more baggage. So I'll see if I see any other questions. There's one question. We'll take that, and then we're going to wrap it up. What are veteran job seekers looking to see on a corporate website career to attract them to a company and their job opportunities? Who wants to take that on? Chuck, all you.
Easiest way to attract a veteran to your company: showcase another veteran. If your career site has something up there that says, this is so-and-so, this is a veteran, this is their story and why they love working here, that's the first thing. Because we also, veterans have gotten used, everybody says they're veteran friendly, right? Like that's a thing now. If you don't say that, I'm not sure what's happening, because you're shooting yourself in the foot. But veterans want validation. They want to see somebody like me doing a job that they're interested in. And so if you have a career site, one of the best things you can do is to highlight other veterans, celebrate their stories, put them out there, add some validity to that conversation piece. And then, as we were joking around before this panel even started, every time we jump on one of these panels, it seems like we run into somebody that we know. The veteran community is not that big. Like, it's big, but it's not that big. If we all start swapping stories, somebody served with somebody who knew somebody who was at the same base as somebody, like, it's not that big. So if you can put that validation on there, that'll resonate strongly with veteran job seekers, because that is what they want to see, and that fills that gap between talk and then action.
Yep. Thank you to all the panelists. We're out of time. I wish we could do this longer, but we have the branch offs that we're going to do after this. So Nick, George, back to you. Thank you so much.